The other day, Pat Barr, who's sitting right there, and I just told her she has to say hello to her husband for me, because when I was running the cable system in Bricktown, her husband was a councilman, and him and the other councilman and David Wolf and all these people used to yell at me all the time because the cable would go out, But I'm still there anyhow, and it didn't, it doesn't go out so much. But anyhow, I wanted Pat and Penny were over, and we were talking to them, and what happens is very strange, and it's strange in this work. Somebody says a word, and it just finds its way inside of my head somewhere, and it becomes a whole thing. And Pat raised a very, very interesting word, and I couldn't get it out, and I wanted to consider it, and the word was skeptical. Skeptical. And probably the most critical thing that I have going here is skepticism, which I think is much more of a safe religion than what passes for religion. Being a skeptic is a very, very important thing. And so when she said that, and I couldn't let go of it. I thought, my goodness gracious, she may have given me a whole outline for a talk here. See, one of the very serious results of not being a skeptic is in the arena of government. Okay, and unfortunately, the majority of people, for so long with government, regardless of whether it's here or wherever it is, we simply believe whatever they say. We believe whatever the media says, and nobody seems to be skeptical about anything. I mean, we went through that with the Iraq thing. Oh, mushroom clouds, weapons, 9/11, and we all, we just raised the flag. Nobody even questioned, nobody investigated, nobody checked. It wasn't the word skeptical. We're not saying, oh, it's not true. We're saying, wait a minute, I got to see something here. Show me something that can prove this, or at least give some credibility to it. And then when all of these people, whether it be the media or the government, is proven to be wrong, we just keep marching along with them, and they change some other thing. Well, Saddam was a bad guy, or they're having a vote. No, and on it goes. And I have always been, and that's why I was glad when Pat raises, and I'll always be skeptical. I've always been a skeptic. Whatever I share with you here, I simply offer as a subject. But what I try to do is offer the subject from very credible witnesses. I try to give you people with prestigious positions in academia and education, science, people who you could look up to and say, well, this is worth then investigating. I'm still skeptical about it, but given the credentials that this person has and the credibility that his or her position gives, I should probably, think about it and look into it. What we do for the most part, and this is what we see here, which is so dangerous in the survival of the world. In this country, so many people will refute the findings of scientists on global warming, okay? But embrace the statements of politicians because that particular politician happens to be a member of a party that they're in, and they'll go with that. Oh, well, the jury's out about that. We don't know for sure. And if, on the other hand, the other party was in power, that same group would be saying global warming is going to destroy everything. So nobody is looking at the situation. Nobody is looking at the facts or the evidence. They're simply making decisions based on their allegiance to a particular group. Okay? I mean, you can imagine if you had as many convictions for pedophilia, if that's what the word, or child abuse as the church has had, but it's the church, and so everybody still goes. But I mean, if it was some private organization, they would all be in, people did that to be at jail. Nobody would go near that place. So we all decide kind of what's right and what's wrong, not on the basis of what's right and what's wrong, but on the basis of what our particular group, how our group looks. We don't want our group to look bad, see? So when they had Bill Clinton's impeachment, the Republicans voted yes, and the Democrats voted no. Now, if Bill Clinton was Republican, the Republicans would have voted no, and the Democrats would have voted yes. And it has nothing to do with right or wrong. It's just, what group do I belong to? And that, in turn, spins off to create chaotic situations. And it's not limited to this country or one particular group, say. And we see it. Scientists say that global warming is a threat, but the politician we want to vote for disagrees, then we disagree. I don't think that, so. So what we have done in that case, okay, is we have been skeptical of the scientist, but not of the politician, even though the scientist is a much more credible witness. But even, let's backtrack on that, because the word skeptical probably doesn't even fit in there, say, because a skeptic is not one who says you're wrong. The skeptic is saying, wait a minute, let me see something. Show me something that will, allow me to look at this further. Show me some credible evidence, But here, the person is not really being skeptical of what the science says about global warming. That person is saying, no, you're wrong, and the reason I'm saying you're wrong is not because I know that you're wrong. The reason I'm saying you're wrong is because my group has a different opinion. So it's really a very childish, immature, and kind of ignorant way to proceed with serious things that affect the world, say. So the point that I'm trying to make here is we can be skeptical of something, but this is a little difficult to follow. But I also have to be skeptical of the skeptic. You see? And so, in other words, if I get a person who says, well, I don't believe that because so-and-so said this, then that particular skeptical person is basing his skepticism on somebody else's findings that may be contrary to these findings. So everybody then, it fits into where we have to just drop everything and not believe anything, really, and that's the best way to be. And be skeptical, which means simply I need to continue my investigation. I need to develop credible information. And you go on in life but not reaching any conclusions. The greatest comment ever made about something like this was made by one of my favorite writers who passed away, and he was a little bit kooky, but brilliant, brilliant, brilliant mind. And he said, and his name was Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, he said, once you have reached a conclusion, your journey is concluded. There is nothing further you're ever going to learn because you're not going to be open to it. Okay? You've reached a conclusion. This is the way it is, when it may not be the way it is. Okay? So he just is always be open. And I've tried not to form any opinions or reach any conclusions per se. I have opinions based on my experience. I mean, I was raised in religious circles and in the church and went through all kinds of stuff. And so I've had things happen to me physically or emotionally, and I have opinions about them. But if I'm going to follow a particular subject, okay, if I'm going to follow a particular subject and there are two contrary opinions, one side says this and the other side says that, I try to place more emphasis of thought on the most credible witnesses. Now, look what we have in politics. one side, the Republicans say this, the other side, the Democrats say that. We're dead, Albert, because there's no credible witnesses anywhere. There's no credibility on either side, really, about this stuff. And the people that are credible, those who work in the laboratories, those who work with nature and so forth, nobody ever asks them. You know, nobody ever says, you know. When you look at the definitions of skeptic, and I thought you might enjoy this, Pat, from the website, they're interesting, and I'm extremely comfortable with these definitions. Let's see what's up. Okay, skeptic. Its positive pole is investigation. And there's talking about skepticism. I want to investigate. That's my whole career now. And its negative pole is suspicion. Skeptics view the world with doubt. Gosh, what a wonderful thing that is. You know, I'm not just going to have somebody tell me this is the way things are. I want to check it out. I want to get some opinions about this. Now, when they say that its negative pole is suspicion, I don't find that to be a negative. In my opinion, I don't find that comes from a Wikipedia encyclopedia. I don't find suspicion to be negative at all. You know, if I'm suspicious about something, that simply means, now wait a minute, this you might, you know, where did you hear this from, or who told you this, or whatever? I kind of think I'm hearing something from somebody else. So I think investigation and suspicion are very positive poles, and nothing wrong whatsoever. I mean, I get it all the time on the website. Oh, you said this, or you said that, or you said the other thing. Well, you know, and I go back to the person. I said, you're absolutely right, and this is the way you're going to learn by you know checking what I said or what I explored and go on and come up with your own ideas. Let's look at the next one. Someone who habitually doubts accepted beliefs. Great. Absolutely great. It's a very important attribute, and I'll tell you why. Because by doing that, one looks for a more positive way to do things, a more productive reason, say. And all of these things are accepted, you see. Joan and I were talking tonight. Joan is a nurse, and there was I was telling Joan there was a doctor on radio on WOR, and I was coming over here. And he was saying that women who have a mammography and there's a suspicious area never, ever, ever should have a biopsy. And I went to Joan. I said, did you ever hear it? And Joan agreed. And what this guy said was, no. Because if you put that needle in there, you're causing blood to flow to that area, and if there is a cancer there, you're going to cause it to spread. So what he says is, what you should do is find a breast specialist, and he should go in a circumference about 5 centimeters around, and take the whole thing out. He says, then you check. He says, but then you're not risking spreading it, and then you might get the whole thing out right away, and so. Joan and I were talking about it, but Joan said the overwhelming majority of people go for the biopsy. So here is somebody on a radio who is doubting accepted beliefs, and he comes up with an extremely good reason for having that. We have a dog. Who has had terrible osteoarthritis, couldn't get up and all this stuff, and you see her struggling to get up or back. So this doctor out in Pennsylvania suggested this new stuff, and she says it's brand new, and it's not really brand new, but it's new. And we gave it to the dog. I'd say we saw a miracle, if there is such a thing, in 4 hours. The dog suddenly just got up. And ever since then, jumps up on a couch and all this stuff. What the heck is this? We had some friends over our house last night, and the lady said, well, why don't they give it to my mother? She can't. I mean, you know, why don't they give it to people? You know? And you saw the dog. It's an amazing thing. But now, if you go to some other vet somewhere, they'll say, oh, we don't use that. We use such and such. And I said to Joan, do you see that? They are obviously dealing with some guy from some drug company that took him out to dinner or whatever it is, or come on, we'll go to lunch. And I've seen it. My friends, you can sell the whole blasted world if you take somebody to lunch. And they'll do anything for you. And so here, we don't use that. We use this, you know. So to doubt accepted beliefs or to doubt what goes on in the world is the most wonderful thing. That's why I'm so displeased with the type of news media we have today. You know, except for a few people on the television, everybody seems to agree with the government or whatever. There's nobody expressing any doubt. And to me, the most important thing that somebody can do when they are in the media is doubt and protect us by that doubt. So the terrible failure of religion to be a positive force in the world is because its members are forced to accept what the religionists say. And it's a good reason. Look, Albert, you have to believe this or you're going to go to hell. Well, he doesn't know. You're going to go to hell if you don't believe it. Well, you know, it's all right, I believe it. But you know what? We all stand up, hallelujah, I believe it. And you know what? We don't believe it. But you got to say that because everybody will get mad at you. Or the family. Well, you're disgracing the family. You don't believe this anymore. So, when I was thrown out of a religious school when I was 7 years old because they were afraid of me. Can you imagine? I'll never forget. You know, they have those iron stairs, and then you can hear them clanking in the hallway. And the nuns were going up, and one looked at me and said, Master Donahue, we're afraid of you. So they threw me out. But you know why? I was skeptical of this stuff when I was 7 years old. I had a very violent household. It probably today would go on down in the record as one of the most violent households ever created. It was blood and knives and fights and very bad stuff. And it was 7 nights a week. I mean, it was every night. And in those days, the police weren't concerned about child abuse. They weren't concerned about, you know, husbands beating up their wives. The only thing they were concerned, keep it down. You know, you can hit everybody, but do it quieter. And that's the way it was. Okay? And so, what was my train of thought? Come on, somebody help me out here. I just lost my train of thought. Yes, and I got so consumed in talking about the experiences, I forgot what I was talking about. Did you ever have that happen to you? Yeah, you just all of a sudden, right in the middle of a sentence, you leave the world. You're gone someplace else. Who was that?
Tell them what your father would say to the policeman when they came to the door. Good evening.
Good evening. Well, yeah, when the cops would come, my father, you know, who had been just slaughtering everybody in the house, would say, good evening, officers. What seems to be the trouble? You know? Well, you know, just hold it down a little bit. Yeah, okay. Then after that, we'd wipe the blood off of our hands, and, you know, on it would go. I don't even know why I started telling you that. I took a...
Talking about the nuns.
Yeah, and well, I got it back. You know, did you ever see Bill Cosby? Bill Cosby would say, I'll get up from my couch because I have something that I need to get in the other room, and by the time I get to the other room, I forgot what I went to get. He said, then I would come back, and as soon as I would sit down on the couch, I would remember. So what I figure I do is when I go to the other room now and I forget, I go like that. So then I can remember what I wanted to talk about. This is a great thing, because this hadn't happened in a while, and it's pretty good. I just went completely to the moon here. I heard myself talking somewhere. I was like, what the heck are you talking about? Where was it again? Well, anyhow, yeah. So what happened, and why I was skeptical about everything, is because, as I said, the household was brutal, and my father, though he's a very talented interior decorator from Macy's, when he was drinking, which was all the time, he was extremely violent. I mean, very, very violent. You think it as bad as you can get, and that's how bad it got. So I remember that when I was a little kid, when they first took me to church, I looked up on the altar and I saw this man hanging with all blood and everything. And I remember saying to the person who did that, and they said, his father, his heavenly Father. And I thought to myself, this guy's worse than the one I got home. I ain't going to stay here no more. So I was a renegade, from that time on. That was great. I don't know. Maybe we're going to get some special message tonight or something, because I really disappeared. I was on the moon somewhere, and I could hear myself talking, but I didn't know what the heck I was saying. Isn't that great?
Where you are now.
Huh?
Got you to where you are now.
Yeah. Well, I've landed again, so okay. So what happens then is people, continue to perpetuate the same horrors that has been committed by people before them, because nobody's skeptical of anything. We're just, okay. Even they come and they'll say, God bless America, or onward Christian soldiers, and all of this stuff, and we follow them and we're fighting and all of this stuff. And it's non-productive, violent activity. And the next definition of skepticism is one that I am very, very comfortable with, and I wanted to share this with you. Philosophical skepticism, a philosophical position in which people choose to critically examine whether the knowledge and perceptions that they have are actually true, and whether or not one can ever be said to have absolute true knowledge. Scientific skepticism, a scientific or practical position in which one questions the veracity of claims and seeks to prove or disprove them using the scientific method. That's spectacular. That is spectacular. And that basically has been, where I'm coming from. And that's why I choose to say, if there is something, what they call spirit, then it has to have a scientific explanation. It has to. And the reason it has to is because it affects us, and we are stuff. It's electric stuff and stuff that has to and can only operate through a particular way. So it's a tremendous, I'd like to somehow paste this up on our board somewhere, because this is basically what we are. And it's our position. And if here, see, look at here, a philosophical position in which people choose to critically examine the knowledge and perceptions that they have are actually true, and whether one can be said to have absolute true knowledge. A religion doesn't allow that. Okay? Religion says, oh, no. You can't question anything. And the thing comes, you have to have faith. And I always thought to myself, faith in what? Nobody from the sky ever told me nothing. I got to have faith in you. See? So if somebody from the sky tells me something, that's a different story, but it's never happened. So I have to have faith in some other person, which I don't say. So the person who's religious embraces what they are told by their particular religion as true. They're afraid to ask questions, and there's two reasons. One, they'll go to hell, and two, they don't want their family or friends to think that they're questioning their faith. See, many people are skeptical about God, and with good reason. But see, God is just a word. It's just a word. I think we're the only society that calls whatever that is God. And it's just the word good with an O missing. Just like devil is simply evil with a D. It's good and evil. And so when somebody says, do you believe in God? I have to say no. Absolutely not. Well, how could you say such a thing? Well, because I'd have to quantify it by saying, I totally reject the accepted premises upon which the title God is, distributed. In other words, your opinion of God, I don't believe it. See? How can I say that if I cannot prove that God does not exist, and I can't prove that such a thing, but I can say that on the basis of the presentation of God by various religions that exist today, I don't believe him at all. My Heavenly Father, he's sitting up there and he wants me to have this and he wants me to do this and God loves you and he wants you to do all this. I mean, who told this guy? Nobody knows that. Okay? There is no such thing as that. I always get, the kick out of the person, thanks to God, the tornado spared us. God is good. God was watching out for us. And he steered that tornado right next door and wiped out the whole damn block. Everybody, men, women, children, cows, horses, everything, up in the sky. I'll never forget the time. You remember the time that Pat Robertson, there was a hurricane coming and was heading right to Virginia Beach, and he prayed that it would miss. And they all got up and, oh, hallelujah, Jesus, thank you, Jesus. The hurricane missed, and it slammed in someplace else and put it underwater. So there's no logic in that. But that's the way it goes. So now that does not mean that I do not believe that there is some kind of other form of intelligence and life within the ether or the cosmos. I investigate it, that's all. I check it. I search for it. I open myself to it. But I can't in any way, demand someone believe that there is such a thing. So it's okay in my opinion to say, I'm very skeptical about that. I really have a hard time accepting that. Okay? And when somebody says that to me, I think it's wonderful as long as that person is open to listening to the other side's reasoning. What's your explanation? Where's your evidence about this? Okay? And once you're agreeable to doing that, then you have no problem with me. And that's all I've ever asked. Let's think about what this says and what that says. That doesn't have to change your mind. But still, you can file it as a point of knowledge. And it's very foolish to say that this is the way it is. Because next week comes a revelation that says the way we thought it was wrong. Let's just give an example, a similar. I was sharing this with Penny the other day. Now, this is a caterpillar. Now, if I don't know, let's just say we don't know anything. We don't know anything. Like most people that say they do know, we don't know. And you and I are talking, Albert, and we say, well, look at this thing. Pretty. Got all yellow colors and everything. And then some goofy guy comes up and says, wouldn't it be nice if that thing could suddenly change and just fly off? I say, you're stupid. That's absolutely dumb. Well, no, I heard this happens. Well, I'd be very skeptical about that. But then the next thing that happens is this. Bang! Yeah, I know. I couldn't get the same one. But I mean, there is a metamorphosis. There is a change. I couldn't find one that matched this. But you get the point. You get the point that I'm trying to make. I mean, we can be skeptical and say, no, but being skeptical is good because it says, we're going to check this out. We're going to check and see if there's any way that something like this could become something like that. See? And that's good. Where you get into problems, said, no, my pastor said this is as far as it goes. Dust to dust, and that's it. You know, and never be anything but a caterpillar. You know, worthless bag of whatever, and that's the end of it. And I know that because my pastor said so. But see, pastor doesn't know this. See, what we're looking at here, you know, we see one form of life on the left, we see another form of life on the right, but they're from the same form. See? Now, let's take this a step in another direction. Let's discuss things in the subatomic realm like that. See? We can be very skeptical, or we can outwardly declare it's nonsense, not because it is nonsense, but because our eyes can't see it. See? How are we going to see this? Even the Bible speaks of this and would provide the caterpillar and the butterfly as a symbol. Watch what the Bible says about it. Okay. Romans 1:20. For the invisible things of him from the creation are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. In other words, in the invisible realm, is it possible for the same thing to go on where the lower form transmutes itself into a higher form? That's what that scripture is saying, you know. So you can begin to feed your skepticism of what exists in another realm, which I'll call the invisible, by looking at things in the physical. The lower form changes into the higher form. We know in the physical that's true. There's no doubt about that. We see it with our eyes. What this is saying, we'll use that same analogy, if that's the word, to think about what goes on in the invisible realm. See? Because it's the same basic life form, whether it's visible or invisible. See? Now, if you still decline to accept that, you hit the wall. See? Because if all there is to use to prove the existence of that which is invisible is that which is visible, and you choose not to consider it, then you've concluded, your journey's concluded, and you pack up your bags and forget about it. So it's of no interest to you other than what you can see. But what's being said here is that existence does not stop with the physical, visible, but the invisible, non-physical exists in the same way with the same attributes of transmuting one from the lower into the higher. See, in many instances, we have to understand, we cannot achieve any status of understanding beyond the 5 senses and 3 dimensions. It's impossible. Because being invisible, that realm can only communicate to you through visible examples. See? If there is such a thing as an invisible higher mind and it wants to communicate to us, it can't because it's invisible. We can't see it. See? And so then it has to say to us, well, look, this is what life does in both that physical and invisible realms, so we get a better understanding. But in many instances, there are outright attempts on the part of people with religious connections to simply condemn the research of others, who themselves are simply investigating. Yeah, we were talking the other day, Pat and Penny, about Jim Tucker. Jim Tucker of the University of Virginia studies the claims of children. You remember we went through this, who said they've lived before, and he tries to confirm through investigation into their claims if they have any validity. Well, that's something to be tremendously skeptical of. What did he do? These little kids come and they say they lived before, and so he investigates to see if they really did, and he comes up sometimes and says, yeah, maybe they did. Now, I'm a total skeptic about past lives, and Joan can tell you that. I don't really get involved in that because it's so foreign to everything that I have been taught from the time I was a child. I was taught there's only one way. We live, we die, and if we're good and accept Jesus, we go to heaven, and if we're bad and didn't accept Jesus, we go to hell, and that's the end of that. And many people cannot veer from that path at all. So if we begin to speak to them about what children say about past lives, they'd run away. Right? So if someone's going to speak of something like children's past life, I have to see some credentials that give that person aspects of credibility. And that's why I would look at this guy, Jim Tucker, and let's see what he says. Okay? Dr. Tucker attended the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where he graduated Phi Beta Kappa with a BA degree in psychology, followed by a medical degree 4 years later. He received his training in general psychiatry and child psychiatry at the University of Virginia. He has published a number of articles in scientific journals. He is currently assistant professor of psychiatric medicine, and in addition to conducting research, he serves as medical director of the University of Virginia Child and Family Psychiatry Clinic. Well, okay, I would rather talk to him about this than to somebody in a store. Or I would rather talk to him about this than, somebody who saw something on the internet. So, I mean, it doesn't prove anything. It might be, totally off the wall. But it's interesting because he is a very credible witness to me. That's all. A very credible witness. He has good academic and scientific credentials. But at the same time, he's writing about bizarre things in which a child talks about living someplace before he was born, and in some instances his staff is able to develop evidence that what that child said is true. So I'm skeptical about that, of course. But that doesn't mean I can say, you're full of baloney. I have to say, I don't know, it's really interesting. But I'm stoned back here because I got to say, gee, this guy is really a very, credible person. But what does he himself say about his evaluation of the subject? And Pat, I think you'll like his first line. Look what he says. I tend to be a fairly skeptical person. Even though I am spending a lot of time with these cases, I don't go to a case assuming that it's a case of reincarnation. It's sort of my natural default to see whether it can be explained through normal means. But to be fair and open-minded, if you look at some of the strongest cases, I think you need to be open to the possibility that there may be more going on in life than we know about. You see? So, I find that approach from someone with such academic and scientific credentials to be extremely fair and honest, and one that I would take quite seriously. I'd love to have a conversation with him. His approach is not that there's something going on here, but rather there may be something going on here. See, you can never say, I don't believe that, because he never asked you to believe it. And neither do I with the material that I present here, not only from him, but from a lot of people. If we say, I don't believe that we are now taking the teaching we have received from someone else who has no clue, and using that to reach a conclusion that's wrong. My pastor says this is wrong, and I shouldn't listen to it. So we turn away from Dr. Tucker, who simply is sharing information and investigation with us, and by doing so we cut ourselves off from the very thing we are trying to find, namely the entity called God. There's a comment that Dr. Tucker makes about quantum physics, the invisible realm of the subatomic, that I think is worthwhile for us to consider. Quantum physicists talk about electrons or events being potential rather than actual physical entities, so that there are various potentials basically until somebody looks. And then it sort of forces the universe to make a determination about which potential is going to be actualized. You know that a small fragment of the population has any clue about that. Any clue of the reality of the quantum world that says nothing exists until it's observed. Nothing exists until it is observed. It has to be seen to come into existence. See? This is a quantum reality that most people have no clue of. Namely, that reality does not exist until someone looks at it. If it is not observed, then it doesn't exist. And you know what? This is the type of thing that called Albert Einstein to quit science. Not because he felt it wasn't true, but because it turned everything he had ever known all of his life upside down. So what? What does he go on and say here? So one take-home message from that is that consciousness, and I love this, is not just a byproduct of a physical brain, but is actually a separate entity in the universe that has a big impact on things in the universe. See, what he's saying is the stuff in your head, which is stuff, you can go down to ShopRite and take a look in the Ephesian case and see the same stuff. That stuff can't think of all of this. Something outside of you uses that stuff. The stuff doesn't use you. See? Yeah, let's see what else he says. And there are people looking at the idea of how, in a quantum way, consciousness can affect the physical brain. If you are open to that, that's it. If you're open to that possibility, if you're truly going to consider the fact that consciousness is that separate entity in the universe, then you have to consider the possibility that consciousness is not dependent on just being a byproduct of a functioning brain. It's going to continue after the brain dies. Now, and of course, that is the conclusions of many, many scientists. And see, think of this. Think of this, what he said. Possibility, consciousness, and then think of electrocuting that bad rapist. What have you killed? You've killed the stuff. But the consciousness that planned and executed the rape is going to continue after that brain dies. And that's why what are we doing? We're subjecting some innocent person down the road to go through the same experience. Because we don't understand how all this works. Destroy the brain, sure. But you're not destroying the source of the information. You're just releasing it to find another body so it can do it to someone else. That's why your dreams are not inside of you, but rather experiences outside of your body in another dimension. The ideas, the plans, the thoughts are outside the body. Sounds strange. I guess a lot of born-again people would, oh, this is some kind of cult stuff. Ooh. But wait a minute. Let's take a look at the Jesus of the Bible. See what he says about it. When the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walks through dry places seeking rest, but finds none. Then he says, I'm going to return to my house from where I came. And when he returns, he finds it empty, swept, and garnished. And then he goes and gets 7 other spirits more wicked than himself. They enter in and dwell there, and the last state of that man is worse than the first. Same thing. He's saying the same thing here that Dr. Tucker said a moment ago, in a different way. The spirit or consciousness exists outside of the body, and when it is cut away from the body, it seeks another. And when it does come back, the situation that will then exist is much worse than originally. See, why? Because the killer many years ago may have used a knife and killed one person, but now he may come back and use a gun, or worse. I mean, he becomes part of the evolution of evil. So we kill, and we believe that we've put an end to the evil when in fact we have simply made it much worse. There are many Christian people who support capital punishment, and they'll quote the Old Testament, eye for an eye, and that sort of thing. But they never read the teachings of Jesus into their understanding, and they thus continue to support the very evil that will one day return against their own children and their children's children. Well, you heard that terrible thing that went on out there in the Dutch country with the Amish children. Who was that did such a thing? Who was? Could that have been someone who had been executed at a previous time? Yes. Now, none of this requires your belief. It's just information, okay? That's what I do. You receive it, and you study it, or you explore it, or you say, forget it. But unfortunately, our civilization is dominated by people who've made up their minds to accept totally the superstitions and the literalism handed down from generation to generation and dare not question for fear of being ostracized out of their family or separated from their friends. Dare to question. That's the most wonderful thing. Dare to be skeptical about everything. But at the same time, choose your sources of information. Consider the credibility of your witnesses. If you want to use Jerry Falwell or Billy Graham or the Pope or the rabbi or the mullah or the pastor or the preacher, whoever, go ahead. But if you wish to consider them to be knowledgeable about nature or the invisible world or the subatomic world, which are God's true creation, go ahead. But they're not. I, on the other hand, will call upon other witnesses. I don't have time. But I will call them out again to stand in front of you, and here they are. This is Paul Steinhardt. He's the Einstein Dean Emeritus at Princeton University. For years, parallel universes were a staple of the Twilight Zone. Science fiction writers love to speculate on the other universes that one might exist, and one they said Elvis Presley might still be alive, or the British Empire. Serious scientists dismissed all the speculation as observed, but now it seems the speculation wasn't observed enough. Parallel universes really do exist, and they are much stranger than even the science fiction writers dared to imagine. I respect very much his credibility and his credentials. But you know what? Nobody ever asked him. They asked Jerry Falwell. Do you know what I'm saying? Nobody talks to him. And what about this? Max Tegmark, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. There are infinitely many other inhabited planets, including not just one, but infinitely many that have people with the same appearance, name, and memories as you, who play out every possible combination of options of your life's choices. Well, maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about. Maybe he does. And I say that his source of study and information is much more credible than the ones that we've bowed before. Look at this from Oxford University in England, David Deutsch. Our twins in parallel universes are just as real as we are. The notion that our world is somehow more real is derived not from experience, since each world seems equally real, nor from quantum mechanics. In an absolute sense, there are no spirits at all, no splits at all, and no moment when your unseen counterparts can no longer affect you. What? Say? So hard, because we live in this little shell, and we have been raised for thousands of years by religious people who haven't a clue. And we know nothing about what these people are talking about. What about Sir William Crookes, who brought a woman, not yet, John, who brought a woman by hand out in front of everybody and say, this woman was dead and buried. And here she's standing in front of you, and I took her pulse. Well, he didn't take her pulse. He had a doctor there taking her pulse. And he had Sir Arthur Conan Doyle there, too. Of course, he was laughed at. The religious people and the politicians, they went berserk because he was the most prestigious scientist of the 19th century. This is what he said. I am attacked by two very opposite sects, the scientists and the know-nothings. Both laugh at me, calling me the frog's dancing master. Yet I know I have discovered one of the greatest forces in nature. Okay. And you know, the thing is that now we're in a question of teleportation and all of these things that we're talking about with Paul Steinhardt and Deutsch and these people. It looks like Sir William Crookes may have discovered this years and years and years before anybody else. I don't know. Probably the most brilliant psychoanalyst of the early 1900s was Carl Jung. Have you ever heard of him? Brilliant, brilliant. Never, has written more books about, the different aspects of psychiatry and psychoanalysis than anybody in the history of the world, and just revered and respected all over and when we start to say, oh, well, I don't know, I don't think I believe in it. Well, let me show you what Carl Jung believed. Carl Jung believed in astrology, spiritualism, telepathy, telekinesis, clairvoyance, and ESP. In addition to believing in a number of occult and paranormal notions, Jung contributed 2 new ones, synchronicity and the collective unconscious. Go ahead, sit down with him and tell him he's full of baloney. You can't. I mean, all of these things that we say, oh, this is a cult, oh, this is evil, oh, this is of the devil, oh, this is... We're talking about this guy with such tremendous credentials and such tremendous respect through the community, understanding of the mind and all this stuff. How do you just throw this out in the garbage? I don't believe in this stuff. But he did. And so what I have to do is I have to sit and say, well, maybe. See? Why? Not because somebody in the store or somebody over a crystal ball told me it, but because he told me. See? And I have to take his credibility and his credentials. There's many more. There's John Lilly, who went down and had conversations with dolphins. Figure that one out. Ron Pearson, Oliver Lodge. No one says these people are right. But we have to turn to someone. And who have we turned to? The Pope and the Falwells and Robertson and the mullahs and the rabbis and all of this stuff, and we're all nuts as a result of it. If we're going to seek for answers and ideas about the conditions that result in our interpretation of life, I suggest we turn to people who extend themselves into those very areas that we're questioning and praying about. The realm of the invisible and the subatomic. So, but who do we turn to? I told you who I am turning to. Not to say this is true, but to say, wow, let's look at it. Let's look at it. I mean, this guy's an intelligent guy. The great majority of people who have never heard of the few people that I've shown you here look for their information relative to the spirit world of the other side. They turn to these. Here's your group. This is the intelligentsia. They know all about it. Oh, we don't need Professor Steinhardt. We don't need Carl Jung. We don't need Max Tegmark. We got these guys. And then we wonder why, the thing is screwed up. And nobody, people that go to his group by the millions, nobody's skeptical about him at all. Oh, Pat, here's Jerry, he, believe him, hey, this guy, oh, you dare not say a word about Billy Graham. So what has been brought to us by the scientists that I have shared with you here, never saying that it's true, but saying that it is of interest and something that has been laid out to us as distinct possibilities by very credible people. Watch. There are other universes parallel to ours. Okay? Now, these don't come from religious people. These come from credible academic and scientific people. Okay? We have individual clones of us living in those other universes. All right? Dreams are real experiences in other universes. People we consider dead can appear live on the earth. A coincidence was intended by an intelligent force. That's synchronicity. Things like 9/11 happened before. It is impossible for a human being to die. DNA in a plant can communicate with DNA in a human. Children speak of past life experiences. Now, these are just a few of the things that we've discussed. And we all have to sit here and say, well, I don't know. But we have to look beyond these kind of bizarre subjects and say, who said that? And then when we find who said that, we say, woo. You know? I mean, Jeremy, did you ever hear of Jeremy Narby? Jeremy Narby? You know what his problem was? How the heck can somebody in the Amazon jungle, smoking a cigar and wearing a loincloth, know how to put all of these things together to make medicines that heal people? And they do. They take a leaf of a tree 100 miles away, and then they walk 100 miles in the forest and find the other leaf and combine them, and it heals people. And the people from Eckert's and Rite Aid and all that go to the jungles to find out what's the latest.